Moving on, we are pleased to have Mr. Benjamin Wong, Head of Transportation, Infrastructure and Advanced Manufacturing of Invest Hong Kong, to moderate a discussion. Similar to the previous section, online participants are welcome to use the Q&A box if you have any questions for our speakers. For our audiences in the room, please raise your hand and we will pass you the mic. I'll now pass the time to you, Mr. Wong. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks, Ed, for a very good, very comprehensive keynote. It sets a very good background for us all and also for this panel discussion. Now, a very quick run-through payout from H&M, Ed, as you know, LFX, Mark from DHL, and then Michael from OOCL. Now, I think for this panel, of course, the whole day is about sustainability. Recited very quickly, the International Panel for Climate Change, we are talking about we must halve the greenhouse gas emission by 2030, and then also achieving net zero by 2050 for us so that we could contain the global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrialization level. So 1.5 degree, put it in perspective, depending on where you're looking at around the world now, and also what articles and statistics that you're looking at. The position we're having right now is that we are about 1.06 to 1.26 above the pre-industrialization level. So it is not really that far away. And there are different items that when we talk about sustainability, actually it takes a long time to change. We've got carriers like DHL aircrafts and also OCL ships. The lifespan is like 20 years. So we need to have the action and the technology now. Now I would like to have a quick run through to the panelists on what kind of projects or directions they are having in terms of proactively transforming themselves towards sustainability, so that we can collaboratively achieve the goal. Maybe I'll start with Payal first.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me here at this session, especially transforming business with sustainability. We are in an era where we cannot talk about business without being able to talk about sustainability. We will be able to grow with sustainability. For H&M, back in 2011, when we revisited our USP, or what we call the unique selling proposition, or the business idea, was fashion and quality at the best price in a sustainable way. We talked about in a sustainable way, and the whole idea within the organization was, can we fix sustainability? We're doing the business the way we do business, but can we fix sustainability on the side? I think that is where the journey began, that we cannot fix sustainability. It has to be embedded within the business. Having said that, talking about climate, which is the biggest threat of our generation right now, here and now, and talking about the carbon law, what Benjamin talked about, that halving our emissions by 2030 or in the next coming decade. As H&M, we as a company decided to put a goal 2 years back that we would want to become climate positive already by 2040. And in that journey of 2040, how would we establish different milestones? So we started talking about sustainable materials, exactly as Ed referred in his talk a few minutes ago. So by 2030, we will make sure that all our materials comes from sustainable sources, which addresses climate, chemical, water, but also the social impacts as well. We talked about setting carbon neutral supply chain. We talked about phasing out coal within our supply chain, talked about working with power purchase agreements with the governments in terms of making a policy change in the markets that we operate. And We also looked at how can we work with our partners in terms of reducing, first of all, the resources. I think Ed also mentioned about that the first step is that how do we reduce our footprint? So how do we work with energy efficiency? So currently, if I talk about what are the results, for our own operations, we operate out of 72 markets. We have more than 5,000 stores globally, so which is our internal operations. And currently, we have 95% renewable energy that comes into our internal operations. We have a long way to go within our supply chain. That's where the targets of 2030 sustainable materials, 2030 halving our emissions, energy efficiency goals, renewable fuel goals, and renewable electricity. So those are the 3 buckets that we work in order to achieve the 2030 and the 2040 ambitions.
Thank you. Thank you, Payal. Embedding it in the business, I think actually that is one of the fundamentals that has to be done. Now, I don't know, Ed, whether you have anything to add on to your keynote speech on this topic, or?
I think I covered quite a bit. Maybe I think the one point I want to echo what Payal said, right? How the sustainability can be embedded into the business. And I believe that that's a key component to me as a success factor for all companies to be part of. And the question really is how can we link the value proposition into that and not to cause the cost for providing sustainability as a cost. It's about the investment. And when you talk about investment, that's going to be some return associated with that. And there's to create that return or reward linkage, I think that's going to be the key. And I believe many companies like H&M has been start doing that out there, is to really link it, how that link to the stickiness of the customer, how to increase sales and everything that in addition to the goal. I think once we creating that framework, that's going to be the key component.
Thank you, Ed. Mark, your success and best practice.
Well, so, DHL, we are responsible directly or indirectly for 0.1% of global CO2 emissions, all right? So directly through our own aircraft, trucks, terminals, any operations, and indirectly through our vendors and subcontractors that basically are outsourced operations, but we're controlling those assets in terms of the day-to-day operations. So our chairman has set a target that we're going to become carbon neutral by 2050, all right? And in order to achieve that target, we need to get halfway there by 2035. And obviously, being a logistics company, we're never going to be, we're always going to have emissions, right? So a lot of that carbon neutrality target is going to have to be achieved through offsets. But we also have very ambitious efficiency gains. And the company has, we've committed to spend 7 billion euros by 2030, all right? And we firmly believe that ESG, is a competitive advantage for our shareholders, and that it's not just, as I think Ed mentioned, it's not that you got to think about spending money, you've got to think about investing, and we absolutely agree with that, and that ESG, as we come out of this pandemic, is going to emerge as a competitive advantage for shareholders, and that people are going to want to own our company because we are deeply committed to environmental sustainability and conservation. So I think the 7 billion euro investment between now and 2030 is evidence of that fact.
Thank you, Mark. For that, of course, I think the 7 billion euro actually is a very important part, because being green, actually, you need to have the financial resources to do it. Michael?
Yeah, I think same as Mark. If you're working in transportation, it's not difficult to identify where your sustainability impact is. In some companies, you need to think about what you can do and where you can find ways to improve. But in shipping and aviation, it's very obvious. And the heart of that is in the emissions that come from the vessels. Now, there are these government-mandated, IMO-mandated improvements that are required, and they are very useful to force people to change, to give people guidelines as to what to aim for. But we haven't stopped there. We also have our own targets. So, for example, in 2010 to 12, when Hong Kong was bringing in environmental regulations about the emission standards for vessels in Hong Kong waters, we complied before the law was in place. In terms of the greenhouse gases emissions and the target to reduce by 50% compared to 2008 by 2030, we had a target to achieve 30% of that by 2020. We actually achieved 39.9. I wish it had been 40, but it's close enough. I've been told to say 39.9, so I say 39.9, but it's good. And we've replaced that now with another target to make another 10%, that final 10% by 2025. So I think, having your own targets based on your knowledge of what you can actually do is very helpful, very practical on terms of these in terms of adding to the high level figures that come out of governments and IMO and other regulators. And really a lot of it is to do with the technology in the ships, designing them the right way, making use of good ideas that your engineers and your crew have for what can be done better. A good example is we always include a shaft generator in our building. Well, you're already powering the vessel. The vessel's already going to move. You might as well add equipment to generate power from the turning shaft, and that can be used to power the equipment on board the vessel. So there are all these things that can be done. We also built a terminal in Long Beach, California, which is the greenest terminal in North America. The ships do not sit at the terminal burning fuel. They are powered by onshore power, zero emission. All the vehicles that run there are fully electric. It houses the largest battery changing station in the world. It's a very positive development. And we will continue to identify ways to do that. It's been part of our practice for a long time, and we don't intend to stop.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, actually, there are a lot of technologies which are being employed on the ships and aircraft that they are very interesting. One item that I kept talking about is a very romantic technology. On ships, on the coating, where they need to reduce the friction. So there is this technology of having bubbles, airs coming out from the coating so that they could be reducing the friction. So it's kind of like having champagne on the ship. Yes. Now, this is the best practice of the companies, right? But for sustainability, it's also about influencing others. Now, the supply chain is very complicated, and there are a lot of small players. Now, we've got the big ones over here. But then small players, actually, SMEs, actually, they are like 90% of the number of the firms actually in the supply chain. They are actually small ones. Put it in perspective, auto industry in the States, there are about 140 branded manufacturers. Tier 1 suppliers, 5,000. Tier 2 suppliers, 25,000. And below that, 200,000. So for the supply chain, if of course, it's nice to see all these efforts, but then how is it being cascaded down the supply chain? So now, I would like to actually start with Ed, because as far as I know, LFX itself actually is an investor incubator, and the aim is actually to create this digital end-to-end supply chain platform. So I'm wondering, is this something that could be utilized to drive the transparency through the chain and also helping the smaller ones too?
Yeah, thank you, Benjamin. Absolutely. I was about to make a very similar point, right? All of us have the privilege to be sitting on this stage because we all work for a big corporate. And I've been entered and attend quite a number of conferences. It's all done by major corporate, on stage, talk about commitment on when to be net zero by a certain date, and all the thing, and hundreds of millions of dollars to be spent. It's all great because we need the corporate or big boy, so to speak, to drive certain movement. Nothing wrong with that. I think the challenge is exactly what Benjamin said. What we've seen that as well on the day-to-day. I will bet everyone that if I invite our vendors to sit here, they may understand maybe 2% of what we just said. Certain percentage net zero means nothing to them, really. They don't even understand what it is. And certain things may be too complicated to know. Not that they don't want it to, they just don't understand. Because they doesn't really touch their life. It's too far-fetched away, and doesn't really see that emotional attachment. They may be asked to do that, they follow that, but do they really mean it? They don't even understand why it is the case. There's a lot of times I believe that how to engage SME, which we are spend a lot of time on at Li & Fung and EnviroSeries, is to really move that movement to be more as an education, as a community building, to go from not aware to aware, from aware to understand to buy in, from buy in have the emotional attachment, and then they take action. That's a process that I think is quite important to drive, and that's how we are spending a lot of time with our vendors, because in our sector, not in the auto industry, we are in apparel. Majority of the vendors are in the second tier. We won't go to the third tier much, but we don't deal with that many of the first tier vendors as well, because our footprint is broad. When you go to a Cambodia country or Bangladesh country, it's hard to find a factory that they do $100 million, $200 million top line. This does not exist in many of these countries. So we will be because the nature of the business, we are by default dealing with a lot of these SMEs, or even some of them are micro SMEs. And we're dealing with them that we understand how to talk their language, how to understand them and engage them, rather than they just get an order from XYZ brand or retailer. They will come to us and say, well, I got this thing, I have no idea what that means, but it seems like I did do that in order to get my order, so help me to get that. But that's not enough, because then you just kind of fulfill a checklist that no one knows and no emotional attachment to it. So what we're trying to do is to engage it, and I love the educational program, so to speak. We don't know what the result would be. We cannot measure the economic on it, but we're spending time with them. And then one by one, it's just kind of converting them into something that they make sense. And what we try to do in addition is, well, talk is cheap. So we serve a supply chain finance platform to go, hey, if you do all that, we can bring capital to you. Then they're talking for other reasons as well. So we try to use a different nature of the thing that to make their life better or easier, just trying to engage them, that so hopefully that they are more buy into, but it will be a joint journey. We haven't set any time that by when we need to onboard and convert how many vendors to be personally buy in yet, because we are still getting data, because to make people really believe in something, it takes time. And I think that's going to be what I call a S-curve as well, that we don't see it that way. It's going to be like this, and once you hit the inflection point, we see, wow, everyone doing it, people go. It's almost like taking the vaccine in Hong Kong and some other places, right? People see that, and then you go. So that's kind of mentality that we are going for that every day from a SME perspective.
Thanks, Ed. I think it is, as I mentioned earlier, it's important to have the financial resources, so it's good to have that elements in it. And also, when you are talking about driving the chain, then also you are talking about three things. One is actually pushing them, the stick. And then the other part is incentivizing them, the carrot. And then the third part is facilitating, helping them so that they will be doing it. And Payal, I would like to go to you next on the similar question. You are kind of like staying on top of the supply chain. Then actually on this, are you seeing the suppliers actually doing similar things to achieve sustainability? Are they doing enough? How are you doing it?
Very good question. Are we doing enough, or our business partners, are they doing enough? I think one way to get to understand are we doing enough is setting up clear goal for everyone as a company, that we want to engage with partners who are committed with our 2030 and 2040 goals. The second way, as you talked also about, how do we incentivize us as an organization? What we do is we incentivize reduction of emissions year on year. with the score, which is embedded as a part of their business performance every year, through which they get incentives towards more business. Talking about also, using a stick. So at times that is also needed. So, the way the stick works is that, you set some threshold to not start bleeding. When I say not start bleeding, so you set certain minimum requirements that you engage with partners who only meet certain criteria. And one of the big steps, for example, just to share, that we took this year, that we will not work with facilities which have coal inside, so which burn coal to generate fuel and electricity and water, for example. The other part is facilitate, as you rightly said. I think talking about funding, which Mark also said, and Michael, we also initiated a team with green investment where we had sustainably linked bonds, where we got a lot of money from the investors, and we want to support our partners to be able to facilitate the innovations, the technology change in order to change their fuels and in order to work towards energy efficiency and renewable electricity. So this mix is needed in order to secure a change with our partners. Talking about full supply chain, I think when we started to work with sustainability 25 years ago, it was on the top of line. It was only with our tier 1 manufacturers where we place an order, where you have an order sheet. It was very clear. So talking about the full value chain and taking the example of climate, so only 7% of emissions are coming from your tier 1 manufacturers. So the challenge became that how do you address this with down tiers of your supply chain? So, talking about tier 2, tier 3, where you do not have a direct business relationships, how do you incentivize tier 2s and tier 3s and further down to make the change? And that is a challenge that we have. We do not have all the answers right now. We're creating dashboards, of course, as again, I will mention what Ed shared. Data has really, showed us that where do we want to put our impacts on. So 17% of the emissions are coming from spinning. Are we doing enough in that sector? And absolutely agree with Benjamin, the statistics that you shared of top tier 1, and then tier 2 becomes bigger, and tier 3 even becomes bigger and fragmented, where you have the biggest impact and where the reach is too little. So I don't have the answers right now. This is where we are starting to use the lens of data to really start working on the areas where we see the biggest impact and where we see we have a biggest leverage to make the change.
Thanks, Paya. Now, going to Mark and Michael. Now, for both of you, actually, you are both carriers, having the ships and aircrafts, and also operators. So on the same questions, and to you, then that part actually it could become covering both sides, tangible, intangible. Mark?
Yeah, okay, well, I'll talk about airplanes. Obviously, Michael's the ship guy. So, yeah, okay, and I'll talk about trucks too. So just planes and trucks. Okay, so we have placed an order for 12 electric airplanes, all right? And the first of those is from an American company called Aviation. And the first of those aircraft will be delivered to us in 2024, all right? And that, here's the problem, okay? So the payload of these aircraft are extremely low. It's kind of like if you know what a Cessna, like a Cessna, like a little passenger plane that can carry 3 or 4 people, every now and then a movie star goes down in mysterious circumstances somewhere in one of these planes. And actually the founder of DHL, the H in DHL, disappeared in one of these planes 25 years ago. But, so the payloads are very, very low. all right? So it can handle 1,200 kilograms, whereas a Boeing 747-400 or 800 freighter can handle 120,000 kilograms. So the payload is around 1/100th, okay? So it'll only be suitable for very, low traffic, remote routes, and also the range of the aircraft is approximately 800 kilometers, whereas 777 we can get 10,000 kilometer range, so more far more than 10 times. So 1/100th of the payload, 1/10 of the range. All right. But we do have routes to serve. We wouldn't buy them just to have them. We actually will use them, right? They're not cheap. But what I'm trying to say about the electric airplanes is, commercially viable alternatives to kerosene, jet fuel powered aircraft is about 10 years out. All right. So we estimate, electric options that could viably compete with kerosene powered airplanes. We're at least 10 years out. Okay, but we're on the way. We're starting. You have to get started somewhere. The first one's always the most difficult one. In terms of trucks, we have a similar problem, okay, in terms of payload and range and the sort of cube to weight ratio. I don't want to geek out on you, but essentially what I'm saying is the size of the batteries and the weight of the batteries that are required to have commercially viable, heavy payload trucks. You end up, at this point in time, it's still a challenge. Hong Kong could be one of the very good places to start, obviously, because we've got a relatively limited range for domestic pickups and deliveries, but we would need support from the government to, in terms of developing charging stations, because you can't just plug it in like a Tesla. If you're going to want to charge up a truck that can carry 5,000 kilograms of cargo, you're going to need a different setup, and you're going to need different stations around Hong Kong. So we started those dialogues, and we're super interested in that. Hong Kong could be a great place to do it, but the weight, the size, the batteries are still at a stage where to make a direct comparison that it could be close to what we can get out of a Euro 5 stage diesel powered truck. We're still a ways away from that, but we are very seriously considering that. Finally, what I'll say is, sustainable aviation fuel. All right, so we have committed to make a 60 million euro. We will spend 60 million euros on sustainable aviation fuel in 2022. All right, and what is sustainable aviation fuel? So it's actually kerosene mixed with used cooking oil. Okay, that doesn't maybe give you the best confidence about what's up in the sky, but we're very confident that this stuff is very highly filtrated and it's been filtered properly. So because obviously if we were to mix kerosene with environmentally unsustainable like palm oil or that wouldn't be sustainable. So we have to make sure that it is actually what we're supplementing the kerosene with is sustainable, and our first target there is actually used cooking oil that has been obviously properly filtrated and it works. Okay, so we will spend 60 million on that in 2022.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, I was reading an article yesterday comparing different kind of fuel in terms of its energy density or whatever way you put it. Diesel, the company used it now on ships whereas the electricity, the power from battery is kind of like a few percentage from battery comparing to diesel. So actually it's a very big difference in terms of power generation. Now, Michael?
So to stick with the same theme and talk about future fuels and future powering of vessels, there's a huge debate in our sector of shipping right now, in container shipping. What is the right fuel source as the next stage? There are kind of two schools of thought. One school of thought says LNG is the answer, maybe only as a temporary step, but still it's the right way. And there are some of our big competitors that think like that. We are probably in the other camp, which thinks that LNG, well, let me put it this way. We're not convinced that LNG is the right thing in terms of an intermediate step. When you look at the whole LNG process from beginning to end, you know, it may not be as efficient as all that, even if while it's actually in use in a vessel, it is pretty efficient. We also think it comes with certain additional requirements which may not be cost efficient and may in some cases be difficult to handle for an average shipping company. So we're looking at fuels which may be a blend of biofuels, of methanol, and looking at those as probably the right answer. The trouble is, today, they don't exist. So yes, you could be very brave, as one of our competitors has been, and order ships that should use that kind of fuel, but your ability to get the supply of that fuel right now is very, very much in question. So to provide ourselves with what we think is the right path forward, our ships are all large enough and have multiple fuel tanks, so that if in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, if there is a real supply of that kind of more efficient, environmentally friendly fuel, we can use it. And it wouldn't require massive expense, massive time, etc., to make that switch. So our efforts are kind of focused in that direction. We think that's the way things will go. But you know, we do follow what's happening in LNG, but we're just not quite convinced of it.
Right. Thank you, Michael. So actually, I think from both Mark and Michael's presentation, actually you can see that the technology actually is not something which is available right now, mature enough for the airplanes and actually ships to be utilized that right away. And even if there is such technology or the alternative fuel, then you still need to have the infrastructure where, you know, the aircrafts can stop and be refilled, ships where they can be refilled, availability of it, and also price of it. So there are a lot of other cascading down questions. Mark?
Yeah, just one additional point, which I'm sure, you know, people from CLP and Hong Kong Electric will understand is, you know, electric vehicles are great, but where's the electricity coming from, right? So, I mean, you know, in a place like Hong Kong, okay, well, we've got nuclear coming from Dai Bei for CLP, which is, you know, obviously, you know, seems to me quite sustainable, actually. But, you know, and then there's coal-fired plants in Hong Kong, which, you know, maybe are not so sustainable. Whereas you go to a country like my country, where I come from, Canada, you know, we have a tremendous amount of hydroelectric power, right? So I think you also have to look at you know, which I think a lot of the power people in the audience would understand better than me. You know, what's the origin of the, how you what are you creating the electricity with, right? And I think to some extent that depends on where you are. In a country like Canada, which is blessed with tremendous amount of hydroelectric power, is something, well, we just don't have that in Hong Kong, so we can't really, you know, it can be somewhat geography dependent,
Yes, whether it is green hydrogen or gray hydrogen or blue hydrogen, all the question, right? Yes, origin of that. Now, I think talking about the dynamics of supply chain, I think we have done quite a bit already. But I would like to cover one more topic, which is on the gender, because gender actually is part of the SDG, and also is something that I think supply chain actually, I think a lot of people would see supply chain industry as being male-dominated. Now I think there's two parts, right? One is actually operation. You may be seeing a lot males in the operation. But then actually in the supply chain logistics industry, you could see a lot of females in the office. I think because of usually females are more detail-oriented, so actually it's fantastic, you know, to look at the supply chain. Now for that, also one big applause, you know, to BEC on all these 4 panels, because I was reading through it, and all the panels got female speakers on it. Rather than having the word manual, we have a proper panel. Now, so I would like to see what you are doing in terms of ensuring or helping the gender equality in your company. And I'll start with Paya on this.
Good to be recognized like this, yeah. We come from Sweden as a company, as H&M Group. So I think in that part of SDG number 5, Sweden as a country is pretty high when it comes to gender equality. So starting from Sweden, coming to H&M Group, we as a company, we have 74% female employees in the company, and we have about 153,000 employees globally, our own employees. And when you look at female representations from there, if you go down to female in the management positions, we're 71% female in the management position, and then 67% board is also with females. So talking about our own operations, I think from a gender equality, it's pretty good. The next challenge is how to also secure the gender pay gap, which is something that would be more critical to look at internally, as an indicator. Coming about supply chain, well said, Benjamin, that 70% of our workers in our supply chain are women, out of a total of 1.6 million, which is our footprint where our products are produced. And that I am only talking about tier 1 and our strategic tier 2 partners. And this is not 100% tier 2. So out of 1.56 million workers, then we are talking about 65% female employees. The biggest question is that what is the percentage of supervisors then, or females in the leadership position? That is pretty low. So with 23% women supervisors. So talking about gender equality, I think that's one biggest challenge that we see in our supply chain, and that's what we are addressing as an organization. So we work with the countries, and gender equality is important to take into account in the context of a country. So we cannot compare Sweden to Bangladesh or even Bangladesh to China. So I think we need to be mindful when we are setting targets on a country level. The starting points in each country is very, very different. And maybe I can take you a little bit, if you zoom into a factory, what a factory would look like in a Bangladesh with 14,000 workers, where 10,000 workers are women, and they still struggle to get a daycare center, medical facilities, breastfeeding breaks. So those are certain very, very basic key enablers to drive a change for women to have a safe and secure workplace. So if you look at these challenges in a country like Bangladesh and then zoom out and travel with me to Turkey, for example, where we have smaller factories, where we have 500 to 700 workers, the majority of workers in that part of the world is also women, but also supervisors' ratio is quite high. So their rights and responsibilities for women workers is quite high. So the challenge is the upskilling of women workers in that part of the world. So different countries have different challenges. Talking about an overall ambition that we want to set, yes, we want to increase women supervisors or leadership positions year on year, but the targets for different countries are different, and the starting points are different.
Thank you, Payal. I think it's very true that if we look at it by culture, then you would always have a different culture, and then that's why different reality as of this moment. But then I think it's about influencing and trying to do as much, and of course, education and training. Ed?
Thank you. Our supply chain is very similar to Pyre in the apparel retail space. Is that if you look at our factories altogether, it's around 70-30%, 70% being all women, female. It's just the nature of the garment industry. We can't take pride of that, which is right or wrong. It's just the nature that you have more female workers into those garment industry. For Li and Fong, our gender percentage last time I saw is about 50-50, quite even. Different varies among country. Our leadership team, our COO at the Li and Fong side is also a female. We have a president there, so it's pretty balanced also. I think we over the years we kind of adopt the approach is to find the right person for the job. We don't really have a separate target is one over the other. Inequality just shouldn't means that the other way around either. We should be saying who is the right person, what's the right skill set, what's the right mindset. We put people through a personality test, everything just to make sure can you work with the team and deliver the result. But I like to double click what Paya said. It's about not just gender itself. It's about the social aspect on this ESG, the S part. When we encounter all the workers, female or male, but majority of the female in those countries, being in Indonesia, being in Bangladesh, being in India, the environment that they work at, and also the level of knowledge that they know is very, very low. So we've done a lot of initiative actually. It's all volunteer, by the way. It's not even firm-wide. We have our team actually want to do that. Is to show we just done a nutrition drive, simple things like that, to show them how to eat more healthy. Show them, and we actually have a cooking class in the factories itself, and then show them how to do some simple food that can improve their nutrition, because otherwise it's just the drive of eating on that. So we have a program that is to driving, and we have our Li and Feng team on the ground to participating together. And so we make it as a volunteer work, as some outing work. We visit the factories, we cook together with them, we show them what nutrition really mean, and that has a big wave, and the impact. And our team also very, very happy about it. So things like that we try to do is on the S side among the ESG, both the gender and also how to improve the quality of life overall.
Thank you, Ed. Well-beings of the staff and also the gender. Mark?
Yeah, so, I think at the junior, frontline, supervisory grades, we don't really have an issue, I would say, in terms of gender balance. About 50% of our employees are men and women. So, senior grades, it's more of an issue. I would say corporate executives is where we really need, because it's, the direction comes from the top, right? So we've set a target to achieve 30% of corporate executive positions to be filled by women by 2025. We're almost there. We're at about 28. I'm talking globally. In Hong Kong, we're already there, okay? But in globally, we have to hit 30% by 2025, and we're almost there. And it's not just gender; it's also diversity of cultures and races and I think that's a very important part, that it's not just about gender, it's also about cultural diversity, socioeconomic diversity, and not just to be kind of a do-gooder, but that diverse teams generate better results, right? And that if everybody kind of thinks the same and acts the same and talks the same, they're all going to end up with the same conclusions, and that's not what's best for the company. And I think what Pyle mentioned is very important, is if we really want to, in companies where there are a bigger imbalance, we need to provide more options for working women with families, and daycare and those kind of bread and butter issues. I think those are very, very important. I was in Japan for many years, and I was amazed at such a shrinking birth rate, declining population. You couldn't find a daycare space in Tokyo. I mean, it was a crime, So we implemented, subsidies for daycare. So I think these bread and butter issues have to support the target. You can't just have the targets themselves. You have to support it with the right policies. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Michael.
So I think overall we do okay in terms of the total staff, onshore staff. Then it's 55% female. In terms of department heads, it's about 40% female, and that's not just the stereotype departments that you might expect. For example, our head of HR is a man, but actually the heads of our two largest revenue-earning trade lanes, Trans-Pacific and Intra-Asia, are both female. So there's a reasonable level of diversity at that department head level. And then at the executive committee level, the board of OOCL, it's about 30%, which is a big step up from 2 or 3 years ago, even when it was only 10%. So I think we've got a decent position, and similar to the Li and Feng position, it's not a deliberate, targeted effort. It's I think that we allow the right people to be identified and to rise to the top. And maybe that's a Hong Kong thing, a Chinese thing, I don't know, but it seems to work quite effectively. But if we're going to talk about the S of ESG and sustainability and resilience, I absolutely have to mention one set of people who need to be considered these days, and that's the crews on board ships, who have contributed to us all being fed and having all the things we want to have in our homes over the past couple of years, but have had huge difficulties, either in terms of getting home at the end of their 6-month, 9-month, 12-month shifts on board vessels because of all the different quarantine restrictions, or in terms of getting vaccinated, if they want to be vaccinated. And we've made a lot of effort. I think roughly 71% of all our crew members have been vaccinated. And when a new crew joins, 95% have been. But unfortunately, that's not the case everywhere in the industry. So these people need to be remembered too.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, for the crew change actually is a very big issue for the industry. For those that are interested in that, more discussion with Michael, or I see Martin is there. Yes, I think it's actually a fantastic discussion, and that the last topic is on the people, and ending it with the people actually is the best also. Now, I would like to invite you to give the fantastic speakers a round of applause for their fantastic sharing. Good to see you all. Thank you.
Thank you to our speakers and moderator for the informative sharing. This also concludes the morning session. We'll now have a break before we resume for our next section on manufacturing starting at 2. Thank you.